if you are in a pivot and you know it, congrats. And if you don't yet have a pivot actively happening to you, we want you to be completely ready for what's next. We want you to feel confident about how to have a resume ready to roll. We want you to understand the market if you don't already, which many of you do, because this market is what it is. There is so much opportunity out there, but it's going to probably look very different than we wish it did. And so we want to be really pragmatic around what we know. Delighted to get into the nitty gritty because Agatha and I both really care about being straight up about things. And so let's just go ahead and dive in. So Agatha, you were very kind enough to join us earlier this week for a part one all about LinkedIn and the LinkedIn profile. And we're very excited to have you back for a part two. So my friend, take it away.
Thank you, Julie. Yes, so earlier this week, we talked about LinkedIn optimization and really, your toolkit for when you start looking for a pivot for different opportunities. The two biggest things in that toolkit are really going to be your LinkedIn profile and your resume. And so what I find is that resumes are always challenging. Nobody likes writing them. Nobody wants to do them. And there's so much sort of noise about what should be included, what are people looking for. And so I'm going to dispel some of the rumors and, the mysticism around what's the best resume and just really dig into what is it that you need to have to be impactful. So I'm going to share my screen. We have a cheat sheet that Julie is going to drop into the chat because I am Zoom, I'm not a Zoom person.
You are just fine as a Zoom person, my friend. And what I'll say is you're getting set up here. We're going to drop some resources in the chat. I will also email them to you later. If you are on the road, they just look for those in your inbox, probably on Monday, if not sooner. If you have any questions, we are going to probably fly through a lot of this material and leave plenty of room for some deep dive questions. So if you have anything that's like right now, if you don't mind throwing it in the chat to me or come off mute at a pause, that's just fine either way. But that I hope that all sounds good to you guys. Okay,
yes,
Agatha, back to you.
Please. The raise the hands, I'm not good at seeing that. So if you want to come off mute, if you have something pressing, please feel free to interrupt me or drop it in the chat. And Julie has promised to pause me so that we can address that. But one of the first things that I think everybody should know is that recruiters and hiring managers, they are sourcing and going through so many profiles and so many resumes. Depending on what the job is, the average is about 50 applicants all the way up to 250. So that's a lot to have to parse through. And usually they're using an applicant tracking system to help them weighting candidates and, bumping the most aligned candidates up to the top. So something you should know is it's about 6 seconds for recruiters to scan your resume to determine whether or not they want to invest time to dig through it further, or if they're going to pass you on and move on to the next. So in that 6 seconds, we have to be impactful. We have to have our resume communicate who we are, what we've done, and why we're hireable for this position. The things that you absolutely need to include that as a recruiter I'm scanning for, it's your job title, your current job title, and how that relates to the opportunity that I'm representing. Your company. I want to know that these are relevant companies to my client. Obviously, your work experience and succinct bullet points that tell me that you have a track record of success in the functional areas that I need you to have to fill this position. And then keywords. We're skimming for keywords. So some of the things that you want to focus on, make sure that your resume is clear and concise. Let's throw out all the noise. This means, headshots, bright, bold colors, formats that are just too busy and things are hard to read. I don't like seeing a margin on, either side. So those templates to me, while you may feel that you can fit some interesting data points, it's just hard to read. So I say a traditional, really clean template is where you want to go. The bullet points are really where we're narrowing in. after we look at the title and we look at the company to see if it's in the competitive landscape of our clients, we are looking for, what did you do? What impact did you have? And is that aligned with the key competencies for the role? What I would say is, as you're applying, really look through the job descriptions. If you meet 70% of these key competencies, go ahead and apply. If you meet 50, you're likely going to be parsed out through an applicant tracking system. So it is really not worth your time. And as a recruiter on the whole, all of us recruiters, you know, somewhere in that 70 to 80%, I say 70% go for it. Anything less than that, I think it's going to be a challenge. So when we're looking at the template, we want to make sure it's skimmable. Can I quickly identify, you know, those critical key elements in 6 seconds? Can I quickly figure out who you are and what you've done, and if the companies are relevant? There's a lot about the size or the length of your resume. Everyone says keep it to 1 page. Unless you're an entry level, I don't understand how that's possible. Most of us have 20 plus years of experience, and I think it's important that we show that progression. So afford yourself 2 to 3 pages if you're an executive. Beyond that, you know, 4 and 5 pages, we're going to have to look at what we need to trim, what's relevant, what's no longer necessary to include. So my golden rule is stick to the last 20 years or your last 5 positions. And hopefully there hasn't, you know, been a lot of changes, so that 5 positions take up a good chunk of time. The one thing that usually kills it for a lot of people is short tenures. You're what's known as a job hopper. So if there are shorter tenures, I would say you need to have, you know, at least 4 years of experience in a certain position before someone is going to discount you and say, okay, there's no longevity. At an executive level, what impact can you make in under 4 years? And certainly under 2 years, you know, it's very challenging. Now, I'll caveat that by saying it's more forgiving since 2020 because the world sort of blew up and it was topsy-turvy, and people were needing to move to bridge positions just because the economy and the world was so crazy. So there's a lot more forgiveness around the last few years. The other thing about format is, and I think everybody does it, but reverse chronological order. If you're Googling format types, it's called chronological order, but it's always in reverse. So your current most position first, and then you go down the line. I will tell you this, functional resumes, I understand that there's a need for them when you're doing a career pivot, or you've got a really long gap in your experience, or, you know, you're a new entrant into the workforce. But those functional resumes where it's really focused on your skills and not your work experience, ATSs hate them. And so oftentimes what will happen is you'll get kicked out. So you might apply for something, but you don't show up in the ATS system by using a functional resume because they're looking for keywords and they're looking for work experience. And based on the job description that's input in the ATS, if it says a minimum of 3 years or 5 years in this field and it's not on there, you don't even get populated. So someone's not going to see you. So, you know, please use a chronological format if you're pivoting. And I understand why you need to use functional. If that is the case, then I think you're going to have to go out and actively look for recruiters and tell them your story so that they can become your ambassador and get you in front of clientele. Otherwise, if you're just applying, you're going to have a hard time. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I always want to bring you some truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Agatha, let me just, if we could pause there for a second. So that felt like it was pretty big. Could you kind of maybe walk us through that one more time a little bit more?
Sure.
Not slowly, but like just can you baby us through this a little bit?
Yeah. So in terms of the different types of resume, or in terms
or just this last point that you just hit on 30 seconds ago.
Functional with a transition.
I think the transition piece, and so I just threw this in like the Q&A about managing gaps, managing career shifts. Like career shifts are, I think, important to be anticipating that we're going to do, but like how do we make sure that we're not almost ineligible for something or going to be in a place where, like, to your point, we're going to have to be hunting down recruiters to try to get in front of them, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it is really challenging. I mean, on the whole, you want to have a chronological resume, right?
Mhm.
Which really highlights your work experience. That is what people are focusing on. And so what oftentimes happens is you might go to a resume writer and say, I'm in a pivot, or I've had a long gap in experience, I'm getting back into the market and this is what I want to do. And they'll urge you to construct a functional resume, which looks very different. It is, here are key skill sets. And here are examples of how, these skill sets apply to me and what I've done in the area. And then at the very bottom, it's a short list of work experience with just sort of name of company, title, dates, right?
Mhm.
Nothing really in depth listed about those positions. Now, while that serves the purpose of saying, hey, let's not pay attention to the work history, let's pay attention to what I bring to the table, oftentimes what happens is it's not well received. It is kind of put in the D pile. So your ABC ranking. It is in the, well, that's an automatic no, because they don't have the functional expertise in this area, the true experience, in this
Mhm.
field. And so it's very, very difficult to get recognized with that type of resume.
Gotcha.
Systems are culling all of the information in your resume for keyword matches. And so oftentimes in an applicant tracking system, they'll, the recruiter will put up a job description, an advertisement for that. And so the applicant tracking system takes that job description, that ad, and then looks through all of the resumes of the applicants and then matches it. And it will determine, if someone's a great match, an okay match, or if they're rejected. And a lot of times they'll just funnel them directly into a rejected pile, or they may have some designation, like green for a great match, yellow for needs more information, and red for absolutely not. And they'll parse them out, right? So for example, if your resume is chief engineering officer and you are applying to a VP of operations role for, let's say, the hospitality industry, automatically that ATS is saying, nope, not a fit, kicks you out, thinks of it as spam. So think of it that way. So functional resumes don't really help in that, because it may say that you need 6 years of experience in this certain title or area, and then the functional, the skills, it doesn't align. And so you're thrown out. So that's why I say, if that is the type of resume that you are putting forth, then it is really important that you connect with someone who can be your agent in a sense, right? Connect with a recruiter, tell them why you're transitioning, get them to believe in you, and let them go and pitch you directly to their clients. Because otherwise, if you're just going through, these systems, you're not going to get picked up.
Absolutely. And so is this, I think just the one last question is thinking, like, who would this kind of be? So this isn't somebody who has maybe the length of expertise, or is this somebody who is really trying to make a total shift out of one career into a whole new one? Or like, who would this kind of person be who's in this place of
Yeah,
having to wrestle
this
with
is a
this?
complete career pivot, right?
Okay.
This is a 180 in a totally different direction, right? You are in human resources in healthcare, and now you want to go into operations in construction, right?
Gotcha.
Something completely different. Because that's when we see these sort of functional resumes come out, right? If
Mhm.
you are a HR, lead in healthcare and you want to transition into a different industry, then, by all means, that is, you keep your chronological resume, and you just sort of in the sort of the headline or the summary decide, articulate why you're trying to make that pivot into a different industry.
That makes sense. Cool. And so the career pivot thing, I'm really excited to get to bring that up a little bit later and kind of delve more into just some of how that works and what we might need to look out for. But thank you for that background. That was super helpful.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
Okay, so again, looking at the templates, I mean, I think this stuff is pretty self-explanatory, and we all know it. We want to keep it concise and consistent. We want to have fonts that are easily recognizable, that are classic. We don't want too many bells and whistles, right? We just want to keep it simple so that it's skimmable. I think that that's the one thing that I really want to get across. Now, in terms of the required sections, this is shifted over time. And some of the headers that we've had are no longer required, necessary, or useful. So, my must-have required sections are always your header, which is your name, your location, city, state, don't put your full address on there, your contact info, so most people don't have a landline, your cell phone, and your email address. Please make it your personal email address. I have seen some people put their business email address on there. Please don't do that unless it's your own personal business and not an employer. And then you always want to include your LinkedIn link. This is something that's shifted over the last several years, but as I said in the earlier session, people are cross-verifying, cross-checking with your LinkedIn, and they want to know that you're alive and you are who you are, that you're not some phantom ghost, that you actually are a real person with this experience. So it's really important to have your LinkedIn in your personal header. And then the next is your professional summary. I've seen long-winded paragraphs. Again, we have to get to the point. And so 3 sentences max is where you want to be, the critical information of kind of years of experience, who you are as a professional, and maybe achievements that you've done that you're really proud of and that you think highlight your skill set. And then the most important is your experience. This is where people get tripped up, right? So what I often see is that it becomes a long paragraph of, what you do on a sort of day-to-day basis. That is the kiss of death. Do not put your experience in paragraph form. Have them as concise bullet points. I always say it's important. The first bullet point should just give an overview of your purview, right? So if you're a leader, what's the team size that you managed? What is your functional area? What is, if you're allowed to share data on the company, sort of the revenues that were underneath your management, what you were responsible for, how many locations, how big was your reach and your impact? And then from there, you can include bullets about your role in your function, so some of your duties, but you really want to make sure that you have a lot of data, metric driven information in there, right? So some of the things that you were able to accomplish, some of the challenges, the hurdles, how did you move the needle forward? That's what people want to see. They want to understand that you have a track record. What is your track record in doing, and where are you most potent? And so that's what you want to highlight. And throughout that experience, you want to go back to the job description and look at the keywords. Really, really important, especially with applicant tracking systems, to have an exact keyword match. So for example, if you're looking at a job description and it's, it uses a specific industry related acronym, you want to make sure that acronym is in your resume. And oftentimes where you would put that is in the experience, talking about what you've done. So I'll give you an example. In hospitality, we have abbreviations. We'll talk about culinary, but we'll refer to as back of house, BOH, front of house, FOH. And so sometimes what happens with not only a robot that's looking at your resume, but people, is that they decide whether or not you're an industry expert based on the jargon that you use. So a lot of times people will say refrain from using jargon. I think that applies to LinkedIn, where you have a wide audience that may not know your industry specifically, but when in your resume, you want to show that you're a subject matter expert. So using those are, welcomed and encouraged. And while we're talking about the experience section, I'm going to show you a little link that's included in the cheat sheet. Can everyone see my screen? Julie, can we see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I find that the heavy lift for most folks is coming up with, okay, what is an impactful experience bullet? What should it be? What should it look like? So here's a little kind of cheat sheet to help you guys in thinking about what you want to include. And as I said, this first bullet, let's define the scope of your management, right? So we've covered all of this. Here's some examples. The other bullets, really what we want to see is highlighting an achievement or a problem that you solved and speaking to your track record of success. So however that looks for you, I understand that sometimes people are not able to share specific information, certain metrics. So, work around what your current company or your previous companies, what those limitations are, but, think about how you can share and how you can highlight what you were able to accomplish. And then there's a chat GPT prompt that I love to use that I've shared here, but also brainstorming, about what do I want to say? And I find that these prompts are really, really helpful in narrowing down what 3 to 6 bullets you want to include. So I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions around the experience and how to create meaningful bullet points.
We'll give you all a second if you want to come off of mute. I think that we probably are not unfamiliar with this stuff. Where I think that we can go wrong is what you identified here, right? It's like not quantifiable, not qualified. It's a little bit too general to really stand out. And we know that that's the job of this, right? It's like you got to figure out how to get into that small pile on the desk. And then out of all of those people, how do you make sure that yours looks the most powerful? So is there anything that we might do that is kind of like we may not realize that we're doing it? So like, for example, using the word seasoned, or using words that don't maybe carry as much weight as other words. Like, how do we, yes, chat GPT, y'all know I love me some chat GPT, but
right. No, I think that's a great question. I think we want to focus on action words rather than superfluous adjectives, right? So if you want to say, I'm a seasoned operations leader, well, how? So kind of let's extrapolate. What have you done that proves that you are that? And then focus on that in your bullet point, right? It's really about showing what impact you've made. And I get that sometimes people will say, well, listen, I don't have all of these metrics that I can point to. You should, and I do recommend once a month, creating some Excel spreadsheet and celebrating your wins, right? Every time you have a review, put that in there so that when you do leave a job, or if you need to update your resume, you can go back to that Excel spreadsheet and say, oh yeah, that's right, I did this and this was the accomplishment and this was the time frame in which I achieved it. So it's really nice to have something like that to fall back on when you are updating resumes. Because again, like you said at the top of this call, sometimes the resume is an afterthought and it's not something that we keep current until we need it. We don't want to be there. We want to have this updated, every 3 months. I know that can be ambitious for some. I would say every significant change in your role or scope of work or big accomplishment, you want to update your resume.
I love me some numbers. So, and yes, Ricky, we've got a link to this document. Jen, we'll go ahead and go to you and I will drop a link to the cheat sheet where this is linked in there, a link in a document for my Ricky. Yes, Jen, would love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Agatha. So I guess you've almost validated for me that I've overstuffed my resume. So it's like a giant Thanksgiving turkey that like the stuffing's coming out on.
So she's the marketer, folks. Just saying.
No, I mean, I was just saying, I have a margin, and you were like, no, no margins. And then I think too, the bullets sometimes can get a little out of control, especially when you have jobs that are, very broad or that change over time or organizational. And so you take on other responsibilities. So, I don't know, any thoughts on the best way to streamline some of that stuff? Because when I'm listening to you talk, I'm picturing And I've looked at other resumes too, and I wondered, that's my other question. If you have an example resume with you today that you could show what you mean, and because I really, now listening to you, I think that a tendency to overtell in the resume when in fact you probably don't have to tell everything about yourself in the resume, because you're actually not looking at everything that we're providing, right? You're only, you just said it, you're scanning. I'm sorry if I'm repeating, because it's that Friday afternoon and my mouth is going faster than my brain, or I don't know, whatever, rambling. But you're really only looking for certain things, and the rest of it, if we get past that stage, the rest of it comes out in the conversation, right? Is that what you're saying? So I like the idea, and a coach told me this before too, to keep, I call it a brag sheet, which I didn't do when I was at another company, but I tried to do it after and kind of went through and wrote out, what are my stories? So when somebody challenges, asks me about, tell me about the fact that you drove, revenue by 32% in less than 18 months. Like, you can't put all that in your resume. So you write out those stories. What are the things that you did, so that when you have the conversation, you can take it to the next level. So I kind of rambled a little bit there, but
I loved it.
no, I think that was great, Jen. And I love what you said about, the overstuffed turkey, because I think that that's it. We're trying to get all of this information across, right? Really think about this, and I liken a lot of things to dating, because I think we can all, we've all been through that. Think about it like a dating profile. What is it, if I am speed dating, what is it that I need to get across in a short amount of time to get you interested? Because the goal of a resume is, yes, to share your experience, but it's the hook. It's the hook to get someone interested in picking up the phone, having a 15-minute conversation with you to get to know you better, to hear your stories, right? So if we're looking at that hook, what is it that we need to convey? And I'll tell you, as a recruiter, like I said on the top of this call, we're really looking at titles. Like begets like. I would love to say that people are promoting for growth right now, especially in this current climate with everything, businesses contracting and boards putting pressure on businesses. People want to know, you've held the position before, you were successful in it, you can do it again, right? So it's title, it's company, and it is, what did you do and what did you achieve? And so the what did I do and what did I achieve? I think sometimes that's where the confusion comes into the bullet points, right? Do I tell the story of what my scope of work is, what I'm responsible for, or do I tell the impact? And I say you can blend the two, right? But you need to think of the three. And if you've had a long tenure and you've had cross-functional roles and different hats that you've worn, then maybe you can expand that to 6, maybe 8. It depends, and trim it in other places. But you asked about a template. I was going back and forth on whether or not I wanted to share, because I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of resumes. If I wanted to share some examples of good, bad, and okay. And I didn't want to expose anyone. So instead, what I thought would be more useful was to give you guys a template to use. And so this is my template, right? It's pretty straightforward. It's in Times New Roman. But really here is I think the best version of what you should do. So with your professional experience, what's going to be really helpful for a recruiter, and especially what's going to be really helpful if there is a junior talent acquisition person, which usually happens in larger companies, is that there is a TA that is just, their job is to post job listings on the jobs board and then just go through all of the resumes. And they're looking for that, 70 to 80% overlap. And so they may not have the experience of knowing in depth what the industry looks like, what the competitive landscape is, right? So what you want to do is have a 1 sentence about your company, especially if you're pivoting. You want them to know, okay, it might not be in the same industry, but at least it's the same size. At least it's the same, stage, right? Those are the things that are really important. So someone who's been in mature businesses, that's great. But if you've only ever been in a mature business, I might be reticent to talk to you about a startup, because I need a builder and not necessarily a maintainer. So those are some of the things that you can articulate right out of the gate, right underneath your company. So I always encourage people, to have just a quick 1-sentence brief about, the company that you work for. And then in the bullets, you get down into your purview and into your accomplishments. So what did you do? Scope of work, really keep that limited maybe to the first bullet, and then use the next 3 to 5 as your achievements, how you move the needle forward. And here are some of, some prompts that you guys can read that maybe will help you get thinking about what to include, and a couple of examples.
I love that. Well, let me pause you for 1 second here. I get that. I don't know if it's anybody else here in the room, but when I hear the word template, my heart just flutters. Like it's a happy, happy flutter of my heart. And so thank you for making us a really cool template. I get that. This is awesome. Erin had a really great question in the chat. How do you highlight accomplishments that don't have metrics? And she's got some really good ones. Dealing with really difficult office culture, managing a union, preventing a walkout, working on communication skills with a really sucky bunch of people, just to make it possible for the company to function. So I'm reading that out for the benefit of anybody who's driving, just so they know what we're speaking of. But Agatha, would love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be metric driven. I think it is, can you paint a picture? So with this example that you gave, how can you paint a picture in as few words as possible, right? So what was the end result and how did you achieve it? You want just to every bullet should pack a punch, and what people's eyes gravitate. If you look at this example, if you just look at this experience, you're looking at the bullets, you're skimming right to added 32 million, right? Because that's a number and it pops out at you. So that's why I say metric driven, data driven, because that's where people's eyes go to. It's easier to read. So if you're doing something that isn't really quantifiable, you can even think about bolding, turned toxic culture, highlighting those words to draw the eye there. I've seen that, it works. If you do that though, you have to do it for all of the bullets, but that's a way that you can drive the attention there. I think it's completely okay not to have everything have, a data point, but the more that you can include, it's just the idea that people are going to read it instead of skimming over it.
That's awesome. I thought we did. So you see the little blue share button up at the top. There is a way to change it to where people can actually access and see it. So if you hit the share button, and then it will say like view only, where it says restricted down at the bottom. If you change that one to anyone with the link, and then viewer. Perfect. Okay, that's awesome.
There we go.
Thank you so much. Now everybody can dive in and start playing with theirs and see if you have any questions specifically. And yes, Mamta, I will totally upload that cheat sheet with those links for sure.
Here's something else I want to talk about this template. So we were talking about let me just go back to this if I can find it, sort of the required sections, right? So your experience, your education, certifications. I will say some groups who are employing a more DE&I approach to looking at resumes will blind the resumes, right? And these are more extreme cases. I don't see a lot of practical application of this, but I know some companies that have initiatives where they will have their ATS remove names. So there is no unconscious bias around a name. They'll remove the location and the education. For the most part, though, folks are still looking at that. In executive search especially, people are paying attention to, your education and your certification. So to me, that is still a required section. The optional stuff, skills, I think a list of keywords is important, but if you look back at this template, those skills can be in this bullet, right? So this is meant a really quick lines, and a list of skills would just be that list, so that it's picking up in the ATS keyword search. And this is where, this is a template, but this is where it becomes customizable, because for every job that you apply to, you want to take that job description and your resume, feed it into ChatGPT, ask it this prompt, or on the other page, ask it the prompt below, but also you want to come in here and have an exact match to the keywords that pop up 3 times or more on a job description and put those in here. So if you're reading something and it's for, CMO, and obviously it's going to say marketing, and you might think, well, that's ridiculous. I'm a CMO. Why do I need to put, market? You need to put it in there exactly as it appears in the job description. Good rule of thumb is 3 times or more in a job description, that should be a keyword that lives on your resume for that application.
I get that quick question for you if we could jump in for just a moment. So on the Google Doc here, so that is linked inside the cheat sheets under the resource area where there is a Chat GPT prompts area that you've made for us that is super cool. Ricky, you had a quick question, or you had a question. Do you want to come off mute, or is it?
Yeah, my question is really just around those resources. Is that last bullet point is also restricted? And I think that's a really important one for us to access.
Yeah, sorry about that. I will make sure I change all of these so that you guys have access to them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Since you're letting me have the floor, I'm going to take one more question. I'm going to ask one question, which is on the resume template. You have graduation year from college on there, and there are those of us that are, some of us are over 50 and some of us are over 55. So I know we talked about this the other day when we were talking about LinkedIn, but ageism is a real thing. And I know that experience is really important, but my graduation year freaks people out.
And you can omit that. I will say this. If any of you have ever worked with Korn Ferry or some of the larger firms, that is something that they do request, because they do an in-depth check. They will go through all of your education and contact those colleges and verify that you did receive that diploma, that degree, and when it was. So this, to me, you don't necessarily have to put in your year of graduation. I completely understand why there's some hesitation around that. I just included it here because there are some organizations that will do those checks and they will ask for that, but you can feel free to leave it off.
Awesome. Thank you. Very helpful.
The degree and where it's from is most important, right? So yeah, this is optional. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and if I'll go back here, the optional section, so skills, and again, that's why I'm talking about the margins that have all the skills there. Make sure that they're impactful and it's easy to read within ATS. So if you're going to include it and know that you're going to change those, that those are, something that's dynamic and not static, I would just keep them as a bullet up top so that you can easily adjust them. They don't need to be on there, but they help you. The skills section, if you have enough of the keywords and the experience, I don't think you need to worry about that. You certainly don't want it to be 25, 30 words. I think you can keep it to your 10 to 15, deepest skills, but you don't want it to be something that takes up a lot of space. Something that I've seen that I actually like, because this comes up a lot in executive search, are assessment profiles. A lot of our clients have their own assessments that they use. We've done ourselves Hogan or ColorWorks to talk about how people show up at work. But sometimes this is really helpful if they know that you've already gone through an assessment. With any assessment that you take, you should get the results. Any company that gives them to you has to give you the results of your assessment. So you might have those on file. They cost money. So sometimes this is really nice to be able to point to, hey, I've already done these and I've got them and I can show them with you. Predictive index is a little bit different because it's based on the company. But that is something that is optional if you've taken those assessments to include those. References. This is something that I go back and forth on with a lot of people, and I get a lot of hate and a lot of love. I say, don't put your references on your resume. And it's not because it's not useful. One, I get a lot of people that don't update their resume, so they might have a reference on there that's, the contact information is outdated, or the person, is no longer interested in being a reference, or it's been 3 years since they were a reference and no one told them, hey, I'm actively looking, so someone may call you and they're caught off guard. But that's not really why I suggest not having it on your resume. The reason why I suggest not having it on your resume is for control. So when you've gone into a process, and I'm sure some of you can relate to this. It may have felt really great, and then all of a sudden it's radio silence, and you really don't know, and maybe the recruiter that's working on it isn't really communicative, and you don't know what's going on, and you're entering into a process with another group, and you're trying to weigh out where to put your effort and your attention. Well, by controlling your references, you force the recruiter to come back to you, to ask you for those. And if they're asking you for references, that's typically a sign that you've crossed the first hurdle and that they're serious about you. It's not often that you see that references, because they can't expose people, and we talked about this earlier with backdoor references, that anyone is doing references until finalists are identified. So by not having your references on your resume, you actually control a little bit of the information in the process. They have to come to you. So then, that's a signal to you like, hey, things are getting serious, and now I can ask more questions and, get an update. It's a way to have recruiters come back to you.
We have a couple of really good questions here. So recruiters, but before we get into like the deep dive on recruiters and those questions there, Momta, you have a great question on like, what do we do about cover letters? Can you share with us any guidance there?
Yes, forget about them. Nobody reads them. Cover letters, I mean, I'm serious. You can forget about a cover letter. On the whole, nobody really reads them. They're looking at your resume first. And after they look at your resume, they may decide, okay, I want to see what you have to say in the cover letter, but they're really hoping that your impact is exhibited on your resume. I don't find cover letters sway anybody. The goal here with a resume is to get someone interested enough to pick up the phone and interview you. And once you're in front of that person, then it's up to you to convey all of the wonderful things about you to get people interested in moving you to an in-person. I have a lot of clients that we don't, in our executive package with our candidate dossiers, we never include cover letters because they don't want to see them. They're like, why do I want to read it? That's why you put together this report. And a lot of recruiters and ATSs, the cover letters are, they're filed differently and they're kicked out. So I don't think that you need to include a cover letter and waste the energy on creating one. So hopefully that's a gift. You don't have to do that.
Absolutely. So recruiters, we want to know, how do we go about contacting them? One of our members yesterday, or someone said to me in the last 24 hours that like only 12% of jobs are gotten through a recruiter. And so I think like if that is, I know it's probably different by industry, different by role, different by lots of different things. Could we get a little bit of a reality check on like how pivotal is having a recruiter involved in your job search? Like, is it a must-have at a certain level? Could we level set there and then get into more?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm biased because I'm an executive recruiter, so I'm going to say it's really important. I mean, this is what I always say when candidates are referred to me, oftentimes through my network, and they are outside of the industries that I represent. I think it is really important because it's almost like, it's like having a matchmaker. You want someone who's investing time to get to know you, who has connections that are outside of your network that can help, really be your brand ambassador, because it is your personal brand, right? And your LinkedIn profile, as great as it can be, and your resume are only a piece of that. They're not the full package. And so if someone is on your side and they're going to the market and they're reverse engineering, a lot of times I'll have a great candidate and I will go to client contacts and say, you need to talk to this person. I don't know if you have room on your team, but this is what they've been able to accomplish. They're on the market now. I don't know how long that they're going to stay on the market. They may do their own thing, but they probably can make a huge impact in your business. You're getting ready to IPO, or you're going to transact and you need to go to market with a roadshow. You have to have this person. They are a change maker, and they'll take the call. So recruiters are beneficial because we have relationships. We have typically the ear of the decision makers, and I'm talking C-suite or board of directors. And so if you have someone that's advocating for you, more often than not, they're going to take the call. They're going to look at your resume. It might not come to fruition, that day, that week, but at least a seed is planted. Good recruiters really focus on the long game. right? They're thinking of you not only as a potential candidate that they can place, but also a potential client that's going to bring them business. And so I say you go to the market. How you find a recruiter is you ask your network. Who did you work with? How did you get to your last position? Did you like the recruiter? You raise the bat signal on LinkedIn and you say, hey, anyone know any really great recruiters in this space? You can go look at job postings that companies that you're interested in. If you look and you see, someone on the executive team shared an advertisement for a job, more often than not, there's some recruiter on there liking it or vying for the business. So you can find recruiters that way. But I really think it is, word of mouth referrals. Ask your network. But I do think that even though they might not place you, and that statistic to me seems really low, 12%, the benefit is that it doesn't hurt to have somebody else that's out in the market singing your praises and trying to make inroads, right? Recruiters are doing good work. Some of it is goodwill, but also they get paid a lot of money to make placements. And so they are incentivized to push you forward. And again, these hiring managers, I've had people that are looking at candidates and they're saying, listen, you might not be running the search. Here are some candidates. I'm stuck. Do you know of anything? Have you worked with them in the past? And I can say, absolutely. I've worked with this person. I've represented them on a search. They were great. They didn't, get that position, but that's because of X, Y, and Z. And here's where I find their strengths to be. And, that sort of nudges things in their favorite direction.
So I guess that there's no I'm sorry, I just asked this very naive question, but there's no pay to play recruiters, right? We as candidates are not able to go and approach a recruiter and sounds like bribery, never mind. I don't know why I'm asking this question, but there isn't anything like that, right?
No, recruiters will never, there is no fee associated with it. Our clients pay us, it's our job to go to market, to continue to build our network. But I will say, what a recruiter is looking for when you reach out to them is directness, and it's for you to know who you are and where you place in the market and deliver that to us so that we can represent you. So if it is, hey, I see, you're a recruiter in XYZ space. I would love to get my resume in front of you. Here are the things I'm looking for. I am looking for this level of position, this type of company, this level of salary. It is, if you do that and you're just upfront and honest, it makes it easier for us who, we're getting onslaught of requests and connections to put you in a bucket and say, oh, okay, great. That's in my wheelhouse. Let me pick up the phone and get to know you. Or, hey, I don't work with Fortune 100 businesses. Maybe let me refer you to somebody else, or at least that you're barking up the wrong tree. So that's my recommendation is the outreach should be, here's my resume, a little bit, kind of your superpower summary, really short about what your experience is and how you're most impactful, but what the level of position is. I want VP and above, this industry, this stage of company, and this is my comp package requirement. Because oftentimes what happens is recruiters are very niche. And so they're either representing a certain industry and they're agnostic in terms of functional area, or they have a certain functional area of expertise that's agnostic of industry. And they're not going, a lot of them are not going wide and shallow, they're going narrow and deep. And so if you're saying, I want to work for a Fortune 100 company and my base comp is, $500K and I want this package, that might not be in their wheelhouse. So rather than you thinking, hey, they can help me, they'll say, I can't do it. And then, hopefully refer you up at least 1 to 2 degrees to another agency that does that. We do that all the time with candidates that, don't fall into our niche. We have relationships, usually 1 to 3 degrees of separation, that we can refer people out to.
Amazing. So in the interest of time, we have a whole 9 minutes left, and I don't know about you, but I have 30 more questions. So there's a couple questions in the chat that we're going to prioritize, and then I'd love to reserve just the last at least 6 minutes to talk ageism and talk about what do we do? How do we work around this? So Katie had a great question. And also Lori, I think yours is a little bit more specific. So we'll see if we can do something quick, but if not, we may need to circle back with you. But last 8 years working in consulting, PR consulting. And then before that was in-house in an agency, now wanting to go back in-house. Any recommendation on kind of still same career, but in-house, out of house?
Yeah, so I get this a lot in marketing. I think the value of being agency is that you're working with a broad demographic of clients. And so I tend to find my clients like a combination of in-house and agency work. And so you kind of play up those skill sets. It's usually the candidates that have that blended experience that, you know, are able to work with outside partners and manage a lot of activity and activations at one time that gets people interested. Agency work is actually a benefit, and it ranks a little bit higher on the Q rating. So I find that that's not necessarily a hurdle that you have to overcome. It's just knowing why. The question I always get from my clients are, well, why do they want to go in-house, right? They're so stimulated with working on all of these fun campaigns. It's like consulting. Why would they want to go in-house? And I think it is really being able to convey why that brand is connects with you and what you think you can do for that brand.
So answering all the questions that you can assume that if you were sitting in that position of hiring manager, what would you wonder? What would be dissonant to you that you can bring up and get ahead of that message? So I definitely love that question and your answer too, Agatha. Thank you. So Katie, you've got a quick question here of, well, maybe it's a quick question. An example of an interesting personal fact.
So I'm glad we got to this. So the optional section, something that you guys don't know that often happens in these candidate profiles, is we want to give life to people. We want to not just be sort of two-dimensional what you see on paper, but you know, who are they? So this replaces the whole hobbies that we used to have on resumes. It is fun personal facts. Maybe it's a triumph. Maybe it is you ran a marathon, right? It's something that connects you to the person on the other end that makes you appear more human. And you know, maybe there is this likability factor of, oh wow, this shows me that they were tenacious. They completed a marathon. They climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Something that you feel like you would want someone to know that is reflective of some of the intangible things, the characteristics that you bring to the table.
Awesome. Okay, so let's do the tough stuff. So after our last session, I got to speak with Agatha and said, listen, this concept around ageism, this is tough. So what do we do if we're over 60? If you happen to be in that sweet spot based on industry, like between 45 and 55, and like everything's kind of looking good for you, maybe there, but I don't know about you, but I'm already starting to kind of wonder and feel, and I'm only 44. So if I'm 64, what do we do to still be the amazing, incredibly high qualified person that you are and take your power back?
I mean, that's excellent. And it's cruel to only give 5 minutes.
Damn it.
But I would say this. I think a lot of times we're in our own heads about ageism. And I'm glad that you brought up sort of 60 and over, because what I see is a lot, especially with women, we think, oh gosh, we're, you know, we got to be careful. We want to say we have 20 years experience or 30 years. That's actually favored. And I touched upon this in the last call of, you know, like you said, that 45 to 55, especially for women, is the power years. People, you know, gravitate more towards hiring in that demographic because it's stable. Usually the idea is, well, maybe you're not going off and getting married or having children and deciding to leave the workforce. You're in it. When we talk about 60 and over, and I said this to you, Julie, I think there are certain roles and functional areas that lead and lean more into the ageism. And everyone's going to tell you it doesn't exist. It's not true. And those are typically in operations, right? What I see on the whole is if you're in finance, if you're in human resources, age is not as much as a factor. And so we may be sitting thinking that it is a hindrance and playing into that. And so what I say is have your toolkit. your resume, your track record, because at the end of the day, boards want track records. They want to know that you've been there and done that and that you can replicate it. There's nothing sexier to a board of directors than a proven track record, especially if you've had M&A activity or exit activity. That's like, we don't care what your age is. You've done it, it's the holy grail. Your LinkedIn profile. I think your LinkedIn profile is going to be really helpful in articulating your thought leadership. So if you are concerned, hey, I'm a 66-year-old professional and I am applying and I'm not seeing responses to my applications. And then I'm going back and I'm looking and it looks like these companies are hiring younger and younger. And so I truly feel like, I'm in this black hole of ageism. One way you can combat that is through your thought leadership. And that is, LinkedIn is the broadest platform. As I mentioned last time, it's almost 9 billion people. Not 9 billion, almost 900,000 people worldwide, right? So if you can show the relevance and the, that you're current on topics, I think that's one way to combat it. But what I'll offer is this. I think we're all very, very potent. We've had decades of experience, and the biggest challenge is often ourselves, right? Of thinking these things are against me. You have to focus on you being the outlier. When I get candidates that are really ambitious, and I see it sort of from, entry level up to senior, there's something that will sway me if I'm looking at a resume and I'm having a conversation and someone is really able to articulate their potency and their passion. I naturally want to advance them. It is something that I just want to support you because you're so passionate about it. So I think if you can get to a person, who is maybe a gatekeeper and really just utilize who you are and why you're in this industry and why you want to continue, that advocacy for yourself is going to help move the needle. So I challenge everyone who's in that bucket to think of themselves as an outlier, right? Like, I am not the person who is going to get relegated to you're too old for this. This is your last career move. I'm not going to get enough out of you, and challenge that and prove to them through your dialogue, through your action on LinkedIn, why that's not the case.
Hell to the yeah. Like this, women who hold purchasing power, women who have more say than at any other time. Like, I am so pissed. I will not go on a rant about men right now. I will not. But what I will say is that we deserve better. And that it is time to grab each other by the arm and get each other, like Chief promised. We're going to get women into positions of power and keep them there. No, we do that. So anyway, I know we have to go. Agatha, I can only just tell you how very grateful I am to learn all of this so that I can serve this community better. I know that everybody here has walked away with something, and this truth and this just facing what is and then activating around it. This community is all about teaching the tactics of thought leadership, and I will be by your side like this community is if you are ready to do something and be an outlier. So damn it, let's go.
And if you guys
thank you, Agatha.
Coaching, connect with me, reach out. I am here to support. I said to one of the community members that I'm trying to build a list of recruiters across industries. So I'm actively doing that and, looking for personal referrals. So it may take a little bit of time, but once I get that, I will post it in the community so that you guys at least know the general direction in which to reach out to recruiters that can be helpful.
Absolutely. We are going to have a cool deep dive boot camp with Agatha that she's going to host in November. We will get that up and running on next week early. We will have recordings. We will, Agatha, thank you for unlocking that last Google Doc when you have a chance. Thanks, Google, for inventing products that make it like not at all clear that that is happening. Women would do better. Now, may we all go have a weekend and just this awareness that we are outliers and that we have so much ahead and we are going to do this thing and do it better than has been done to us. So we'll see you very soon and have a good weekend off.
Bye,
Thanks.
everyone. Thank you.